TV XYZ as well. But there you were, as we were watching you, as it played out right there before our eyes, when you were talking about standing on truth that has been peddled as far as the macroeconomic figures are concerned.
Yeah.
Explain exactly what your position really was.
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. First of all, we've got to understand exactly what happened, and I will make it very brief on that. The pandemic that we were all confronted, we're still confronted with it, which started a year ago, or most part of 2020.
Absolutely.
Happened to every country. Every country suffered it. Every country had its fair share of it. It was severe everywhere. No country was spared. I'm not quite sure any country that was completely spared from the pandemic. So the challenges were equally the same. The pandemic brought up two crises. One is a health crisis. The other is an economic one. Now, countries that were better prepared in terms of health infrastructure fared better than others. So, though the pandemic affected everyone, some countries fared better than others in health terms and in economic terms.
Right.
Ghana, we were fortunate to have His Excellency John Dramani Mahama being our president at the time under the NDC government, put in place health infrastructure. I mean, I don't think he even, in his wildest dream, he even thought of something like what has happened. But he put this infrastructure so that we will have the capacity to be able to deal with our clinical needs. Fortunately, the MPP government, inherited, and then the pandemic came in.
Yeah, it struck.
Unfortunately, they inherited. But we had enough health facilities, health equipment, and health personnel to deal with the situation, though we were still, short in some places. So we did better under the health crisis as a result of the preparation that we have made earlier on under President Mahama's.
And when you talk about preparation, you're looking at health-wise alone or the economy?
Well, I'm coming now. I've split the two crises. I've split them up.
Okay.
I'm talking about why we have done relatively better than other countries in terms of the health crisis that the pandemic brought, was as a result of the infrastructure that we have put in place together with the personnel and the equipment, because these hospitals were state-of-the-art hospitals that were built. You can, name them all over the place. And also equipment were put in there to obviously deal with, the patient. These things...
Is that to suggest that government is wrong when it says that it put in place some pragmatic measures, and that's the reason Ghana is being praised across the globe?
Well,
for managing the pandemic well? You
don't put a pragmatic measures on a football pitch. It has to be in the hospital. If you put the pragmatic things in place, they happen on the hospitals, the clinics, and all that, not on a football pitch. So the hospitals, the infrastructure had to be there. The equipment to be able to check people's, blood pressure, scans, and all those things need to be there. And all these hospitals. So the credit, we should give credit where credit is due. That His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, under his government, put certain things in place without even knowing COVID is on its way, which benefited us all as Ghanaians, I won't say the MPP government. It benefited us, the Ghanaians, and made it possible for the MPP government to manage the pandemic better than it would have been. That is not to say they even did a good job with it, because there were some lapses and challenges to do with lockdown, feeding, and other things that they were quite abysmal. Let's put the health thing aside. By the same token, those who did well under the economic crisis of the pandemic were those economists with good managers of the economy who had put in place proper macroeconomic stability and other things that cushions an economy to be able to do well. So even in a worst case scenario, where there had been some adverse effect, you will come out better than your neighboring country who probably did not have the same economic preparation or good managers as you do.
And so the 2017 growth rate we saw has got nothing to do with Akufo-Addo's
absolutely
economic
not. Absolutely not. I mean, economic, it takes time. But let's put that even aside. When you look into this budget, you realize that we perform abysmally on the economy.
Yes.
And everything is being blamed on pandemic. This budget is actually a pandemic, blame the pandemic budget. Everything is being blamed on it.
But is it not being realistic? Is that not what
absolutely not.
What we are faced with?
That is what we need to break things down.
It's not exclusive to
because
Ghana.
If you don't break things down, it's easy to sweep things under the pandemic carpet and say that this is as a result of the pandemic. That's where we got it. So let's just take it. I'll take you through a few, things that we haven't actually looked at. If you look at GDP, I mean that is the growth of an economy. It was predicted, or it's been predicted by not predicted, that's the realization, by the IMF, World Bank, and all these, institutions with the capacity to do these things. And they have said that on the average, based on research, the global economy contracted by 3.5%. Which means that on the average, if you take average for every country, obviously, some countries may have contracted much bigger than others. All depends on your management of the economy. If you are a good manager, you will probably beat the average. In that case, your contraction will be less than 3.5. If you are a bad manager, you will also not be average. You may be contracting by 7%. So if this government is calling itself good managers of the economy, you will expect that at least they should be able to do average. Now, what is average? Average is 3.5. You can compute this. This is economics is science. You can actually compute it. When you compute it, you realize that if we had contracted by an average of 3.5, we should have landed around about 3.3% GDP. We got 0.9, which obviously shows that our performance is abysmal and below average. Therefore, you cannot be a good manager of the economy and not even be able to perform average. If you compare this, let's not go to the United States and other places. Let's take our neighboring countries, ECOWAS countries, 15 countries in ECOWAS. When you go there, countries with economies the same size as ours, and let me just take Ivory Coast, performed almost 2%. There are other countries who got around 2% of GDP, which means that they did better when you take them closer to the average than we did. So we cannot be a good managers of the economy if we perform that abysmally and compare to our neighbors with economic size as ours doing better than us. Let's go to deficit. We predicted a deficit of about 4.7. Previously, they have told us our deficit was 4.8, 4.5, depending on who you speak to. Because they have done a lot of financial engineering with the numbers that you can't even track the macroeconomic and fiscal numbers anymore. Dr. Bawumia in his town hall meeting says 4.8. Finance minister comes to parliament and says 4.5. But let's put that aside. The projection was 4.7. Then again, that's before COVID projection. 4.7 economy, the deficit will be 4.7 because they wanted to obviously stay within the fiscal responsibility rule of not going above 5%.
Yeah.
Now, what happened then? COVID happened. So there should be a COVID component of the deficit, and this can also be easily calculated. You look at it and said, how much money was actually spent on COVID? They collected over 7 billion, IMF and all that monies that you got. But they are saying in the budget that the COVID expenditure was about 19.7 billion cedis. It's in the budget. Which means that you can actually calculate the deficit based on the COVID alone. Even if you don't attach any revenue to it. The COVID deficit, when you do the computation, should not be more than 5% of the deficit. So you would expect that if the COVID depressed our deficit, or COVID basically made our deficit look bad, the COVID deficit is between 4 and 5%. If you take it as 4%, then it means that your deficit should be around 8.7. If you take it as 5, your deficit should be around 9.7. We ended up with a deficit of 13.7. That is if you add the financial, sector cleanup.
Yeah.
If you don't, they say it's 11.7. Both are worse than what should have been average. It tells you that the component that they claim is deficit, that accounts for the total deficit, is actually not correct because it's less than that. Therefore, between 11.7 or 13.7 and 8.7 or 9.7, the difference is as a result of you can use that if you are doing calculation, mathematical calculation, you can say that is the measure of an incompetent, the level of incompetency by the government. Now, let's quickly run through this so we can talk about other things. Yeah. I'm using this to basically paint you a picture. The same thing happens to the primary balance. Obviously, primary balance comes at the back of the deficit, which they said will be 0.8 in positive. It ended up being 5.3 in deficit. So let's move on. That's also another one. You go to inflation, where they have made so much noise about having created a single-digit inflation. Inflation also has something to do with Bank of Ghana because they do inflation targeting. But the government always takes credit and put it on the fiscal side.
Right.
But that's no problem. If you want to take the credit, you should also take the blame. They said the inflation was 7.9, 2019. It ended up, and then they projected 8%. Inflation ended up as 10.4. When you compare it to our peers, again, I'm sticking within the West African framework. 15 countries in West Africa, or in ECOWAS, 11 of them did better on inflation than Ghana. They suffered the same COVID. So how could they do better than us? And we claim that we are better managers of the economy. Why did we get inflation of that? Because we did not manage the COVID well. Remember, we botched the COVID lockdown. We could not feed our people with all the monies that we've gotten. We created panic buying. People were buying food and hoarding it because there's going to be a lockdown, there's this, there's not going to be, and all that. That is what created that inflation. That definitely and certainly cannot be a better manager of the economy. Finally,
right,
exchange rate. That's the one they start praising themselves with. Oh, actually, even with COVID, we did better with the exchange rate than other people. Yes, that is true. But why is that? This is what you will expect. That in a COVID situation, you expect things like exchange rate to do better.
Why?
And it has nothing to do with the government. And let me tell you why. There was a lot of COVID money coming, 1 million from the World Bank, 1 billion. Just from from IMF,
yes, IMF,
from World Bank, from all that. All these foreign donors bringing us money for COVID. All those money come in foreign currency. And they are kept in the central bank. So when that money comes in, it actually props up your reserves. When you have more inflows of dollars in your system, your cedi will strengthen because there is a less demand, or even if there's demand, you can meet the dollar demand. Therefore, cedi does not suffer the same pressure as it was under before.
So minus that aid, our cedi wouldn't have gained that marginal strength.
Absolutely not. The other thing as well is that the pandemic, and these are the things that the pandemic, fortunately or unfortunately, came to help, even though it was bad. But we've got some gains from the pandemic. As a result of this monies coming in, we were able to save our currency. Another thing is that during that time, people who normally after Christmas would have gone out to buy, goods to fill their shops were not going because of the pandemic. Therefore, there wasn't much pressure on looking for the dollars in our system, which automatically will depreciate your cedi. People were not traveling. They said something here which was quite funny. They said there were some outflows which were pandemic-induced outflows. There is nothing like a pandemic-induced outflows that happened. The capital flight or portfolio outflows where as a result of bad management of Ghana's economy and as a result of the banking crisis, foreign investors or investors generally who invest in our bonds, normally when the bond matures, if they have confidence in your economy, they will roll it over.
Right.
These guys decided that because of the way we were handling our financial crisis, the way the economy is not doing well, they lost confidence in the economy and decided to liquidate when their bonds matured and repatriate their money from the system. Now, they said that in 2018. They said that in 2019 budget. In 2020 budget, they have changed the narrative and say that it is not pandemic induced. Every country got pandemic. Why will somebody liquidate their money from one pandemic country and take it to another country that is not pandemic free? If you are taking your money from a pandemic country into another free pandemic country, then it's understandable. So that itself is problematic. Then our debt, finally.
Which I would want us to come to.
Okay, all right.
And as we come to managing our debt, and of course looking back to where we've come from and where we are now, is there an indication in the 2021 budget that we're going to get out of this maze, this quagmire that we find ourselves? Because already it appears that the ballooning debt stock, as per some economists that we've spoken to even on this platform, has a dire consequence on the Ghanaian economy. Does it look like there's going to be a recovery, there's going to be a turnaround anytime soon?
Well, Ghana's economy, the entire economy, Ghana's GDP is around 400 billion, 396 or 400 billion is the whole economy. And we owe, according to them, it's even more than that, 291. We owe. The money we bring into this country is like your salary. You get a money of 400 and 290, almost 300. It's money you owe people.
Right.
Definitely you are not going to fare well.
So you don't have money.
You are not going to meet a lot of things that you are doing. And then it becomes difficult for you, for anybody to find you credit worthy to give you money. Now borrowing will be quite expensive because anybody who will lend us money has the fear that we may not be able to pay. We may default it because we've reached 76 if you compare it as a percentage of your GDP, which I've given the nominal figure.
And we've gone beyond that ceiling. Dr. Bawumia mentioned, in the run-up to the 2016 election, where he indicated that you then, the managers of the economy, had run the economy down to the extent that we were a highly indebted middle-income country, for that matter.
I wish if you had an opportunity, you would draw that statement. You know, we told them when they were in opposition that these guys, you guys don't know what you're talking about. When you're in opposition, you can say whatever you want. When you come into government, then you see the reality.
So is that the point that we've reached?
That's the point we've reached.
We've gone beyond
the chicken
being
has
highly
come.
indebted.
Well, we are, right now, our debt is like we have gone closer to a cliff. Now it's just a matter of somebody tap you on the shoulder and you've gone over.
That's bad.
Absolutely, extremely bad. You see, that has so many consequences.
So then how do you cater for one district, one factory? How do you cater for the year of roads and all those numerous promises that we have in the budget?
This government actually did not understand two things. They didn't actually understand the economy, and then they don't understand governing. And I'll tell you the reason why they don't understand governing. First of all the things they talked about, the money is here, we can find the money and all that. They've come and done worse. When you talk to them about debt, they start talking about percentages. But debt is in nominal terms. If we are going to share Ghana's debt, we will share it in nominal terms, not in percentages.
But if percentage-wise, they appear to be doing better than you, is that a narrative they should hide from Ghanaians?
No, because you are not doing better. But when you look at just percentages, you are not. If you look at, say, from about 9 million to 120 million, and then you look from 120 or 22 billion to 297, then you're actually in trouble. Because, all along they've been trying to suppress the debt to GDP. It's gotten to a point where it's basically gotten out of hand. The problem we have is that we now have interest payment. We need to service this debt. So interest payment alone is going to take a good chunk of our budget. Then you have other statutory things that you have to pay for. Once you finish paying, if you look in the budget, The amount of money they put down for infrastructure is pitiful. But then in times like this,
it's pitiful in what sense?
It's pitiful that
is not enough.
There's nothing to write home about.
That is
in
not
fact,
enough.
Their allocation for infrastructure has never been good, and even this time around, it's worse.
But the narrative is that we are not in normal times. COVID has hit so hard that we must tighten our belt and cut down on expenditure.
We are not in normal times because our economy was actually on its knees. Our economy was in a vegetative state before the COVID came. So if you are not prepared, it's like the COVID. If the COVID comes and attack you and you have an underlying illness, then the COVID is going to
amplifies it.
Yeah, the same thing with the country. Those who have a better immune system, who got COVID, probably showed no sign. Ghana as a country has an underlying illness. Therefore, when the COVID hit us, we are suffering as if we had, diabetes or some other illness that can escalate your COVID, your health. That's the situation. And then they were able to sustain that through lies, through borrowing, and by giving us figures that were not right.
Okay, so now that certain expenditure don't seem normal or ordinary or not worth writing home about.
Yeah.
How do we go about implementing these projects? Is there an alternative? Because I'm looking at a situation where, I mean, in a bid to raise revenue, they saddled us, the taxpayer, with numerous taxes. Is that the right route to use?
Well, there is an alternative, basically. Probably an alternative government would have been ideal. But here we are. Now, first and foremost, we have actually not been doing well when it comes to revenue, historically.
Yeah.
We are doing around 16% or something.
And that includes the NDC government?
Yes, absolutely. And we have been having various efforts in expanding our tax base and all that to be able to increase the revenue. It's been a struggle. Now, in the last...
And the reason for the struggle, in simple terms, will be?
That we still need a proper structure and of taxing. We tend to be taxing the same people whom we have identified. We keep slapping, like right now, slapping more taxes on them. That in the end becomes counterproductive. If you tax the same people over and over, they begin not to pay the taxes, and it becomes counterproductive because you are taxing to get revenue. If the people then choose or find any other means to avoid taxes, then you'll be in trouble. So we have not done well in that side. We actually lost over 13.6 billion of taxes in 2020. Partly the pandemic, people lost their jobs, companies were shut down, obviously they were not paying taxes. Hospitality industry basically, collapsed. So if you find yourself in such a situation, you don't carry on with your expenditure as you have done. You say it's not in normal times, therefore you cannot have a normal expenditure. If you are a government that has promised so much and keep promising, then you need money to be able to execute all the programs that you are talking about.
Yes.
And if you don't have the money, you will start to borrowing. Now you have borrowed to the hills. There's not much borrowing space. If you want to borrow, you pay higher interest, which means that you make more interest payment and amortization.
So then you need to turn to somewhere
need some rationalization, first and foremost. You've got to look at the programs, all the promises that you have promised. Which promises can wait? Because there are certain things that may not be as urgent as in normal times. And you've got to make sure that the programs you want to implement are programs that will help grow the economy and programs that will create jobs. A lot of things have been done in the last 4 years. That has basically been a waste of money, has not created any jobs,
right?
And we can't continue doing those.
And I would want you to identify those things that have been a waste. I mean, those policies that have been a waste. But
sure.
hold that thought for me. And let me just remind our viewers that you're still watching XYZ Tonight. Our guest is Honorable Kwaku Reketegan, the Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South constituency. We're discussing the Ghanaian economy, the 2021 budget statement. And of course, bottom line, we would want to know exactly how do we recover from here. Stay with us as we get to find out more from Honorable Kweku Reketagan. Just stay with us.
Peace of mind is very essential in your journey to success. For our Kwesi Papa, peace of mind means having a proper covering over his family. Literally. For Araba, aka Injection Mama, it's about having the funds to complete her advanced nursing course. And as for Corporal Odami, it's as simple as reporting on time for his shifts. Sometimes all you need is a simple push. At Needs Microfinance, we have tailor-made loan packages for salaried workers under the Controller General's Department. With the low interest rate and quick wahala-free process, you are guaranteed of a timely solution to get back that peace of mind, literally in 30 minutes. Needs Microfinance. Growing with you.
Let's see if we can do this in the next 10 minutes. Our guest is Honorable Kweku Reketagan, the Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South constituency. We're doing an analysis of the 2021 budget statement. Some of your messages coming through. Mohammed Abbas, we've seen you already, saying you're enjoying the program. This one here says, please, we want to find out exactly what the impact of the numerous taxes would be. This one here says, if it's true that COVID has nothing to do with the alien economy, then what is the problem? This one here says, are they really better managers of the economy? That's from Fifi, sending this particular message on Facebook as well. Do well to send your message. We'll be glad to share them with the rest of the world. Honorable, still on this whole conversation about revenue mobilization and the reality that we are faced with. When you listen to Kojo Ponkroma, and I'm sure when he made that point on the floor of Parliament yesterday, he didn't hide it. That look, the time has come to bite the bullet. Like it or not, this is the reality. We all need to tighten our belt. Just this evening, I'm sure you picked out that report, that for the next 3 years, Labour is to tighten their belt because they should not be expecting any marginal increase in terms of remuneration or salaries. So is this a reality that we need to embrace, that we need to pay more because all hands needs to be on deck because the country is in a crisis and nobody seems to be admitting to it?
You know, it's unfortunate. And I listened to my honorable, young brother, Kojo. And it's really sad that we've gotten to a position where such reckless statements are made by ministers of state.
Reckless?
Yeah, I mean, when you say certain things, it's time to buy the bullet. Now, imagine. Government is supposed to give hope to its citizens. So even if you can't give them hope, don't actually say things that will depress them. It's like going to your doctor and your doctor saying to you that, you know what, your sickness now, you just have to buy the bullet. There's nothing.
But that's the doctor being truthful. Well, I mean, telling you what the reality is.
Yes.
Not hiding from, anything
it's
from
not
you.
about hiding. You've got to manage a lot of things when you're a doctor. Yes, you tell the people the truth, but you also see what you can do. And until it's finally over, people should be able to look at other options. You cannot make statement that, we gave you free water, it's time to pay for it and all that stuff.
But it's obvious you need to explain
why did you give them the free water in the first place if you're going to ask them to pay for it in the end? Then what have you done for them? You helped them when they could not stand. But as soon as they were able to stand, you are just pushing them down again. I mean, let's see if we could just issue and look at the taxes, what the government itself has presented. I and most of my colleagues, and most of Ghana felt that the COVID money that we received, the 19.7 billion they claim they have spent, the 7 billion that came from the World Bank and other places, were basically money that was not well spent. We did not get good value for money. As I said earlier on, we couldn't even manage 2 weeks of feeding. Most of the money, somebody will ask me, prove it, went into the elections.
Yeah, prove it.
Yes, I will prove it. I want you to. I contested an election, and I know the people I contested elections with were people who were spending money that could not be explained, who were putting Veronica Bucket and other things in town, putting their names of it as if it was coming from them, and putting it in areas where it benefited their so-called people, instead of giving it to Ghanaians. After having done all this, we have not seen any proper audit. If you spend the taxpayers' money in such an abnormal time, when things are better, at least a year, you must be able to come and explain. I thought this budget...
But that's up to Parliament to ensure that it is done,
well,
isn't it?
Parliament will ensure of that.
Yeah.
But it's also up to the government to be forthcoming. You can't say that, well, if you don't ask me the question, I won't answer, even if I know that I owe it to the people to answer certain questions. When something is given to you, you must account for it. So before you come and put a levy on pandemic, you must be accountable for the money you have spent. Yeah, we all know that some of the monies that we got for the pandemic were actually loans. The 1 billion from the IMF, it's a loan. The rapid credit facility.
That's right.
It's a loan with low rates and everything. It was rapid because of the COVID. So all these things will be paid for. We understand that. So if you're going to levy us to pay for that, you must be able to give an account what all those monies you collected were used for, because we haven't gotten good value for money. We have certain things that saved us. Our weather, the infrastructure put in place by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, and a whole lot of things saved the health situation. The pandemic was first and foremost about health. Then, at the back of it, you have the economic issues. Monies that were supposed to be given to people as a stimulus package.
Yeah.
A lot of people did not get it. People who lost their jobs did not get anything. So what has that money been used for before you start even asking us for levies?
But the reverse argument, and again, I quote Kojo Oponkroma, the information minister, because he speaks for government.
Yeah.
The reverse argument from him is that, I mean, countries like the United States of America, even though they are doling out money in terms of, resuscitating the economy and reviving those who are broken at this point, they've also introduced taxes, even in the wake of COVID-19.
Yeah, but
why can't Ghana?
They have also introduced, if you're going to copy United States and do what they've done, do it properly. Introduce a massive stimulus package and then say United States have done it, that's what we're also doing. Don't pick certain aspect of it. And let's put the United States aside, because it's a huge economy with all that, it has. Let's compare ourselves to just our neighbors. Now, first and foremost, as I said, you have not accounted for the money given to you. You are asking for more through taxes. That itself cannot be acceptable. As to whether the taxes should be imposed or not, it's a second question. But the first question is, what did you use that massive amount of money that we received for? So if we are going to negotiate on levies, it must be negotiated on a standpoint that you are going to make a full account of what that money has been used for. That's what I would recommend. But of course, my caucus and our party will have its position known soon. But if you ask me, if you don't make account for that money, you cannot even be discussing any tax on that. Now let's go to the second tax. They've been calling it a baller tax.
The sanitation and pollution tax.
You see, there are certain taxes.
Or levy, yeah.
There are certain taxes that people tend to be soft to those taxes. If you introduce, I remember those days in Europe and the United States and all that, when you introduce something like a tax on cigarette, a lot of people welcome it because people say smoking is not a good thing. Therefore, governments in Europe and America were able to rake in a lot of revenue from smoking. Same with drinking. That's what we're doing here now. We want money, so let's take a soft target that people will be, our environment needs to be clean. We need all these things. So that tax is not bad if it's going to clean the environment. I can tell you that tax was imposed or is being suggested not to cure any problems in sanitation, but for government to make money to be able to support the crisis that it's in.
And it's not true that...
And for that reason, I will not support such a tax.
You won't support such a tax?
No, absolutely not.
You'll reject it?
Well, as I said, this is my personal opinion.
Right.
I mean, my caucus and my party will make a position on that.
Okay.
But I'm telling you that that tax is not going to any of the things they're talking about. It's a soft tax. Looking for a soft target. That's why I gave you the drinking issue.
That's right. It's a great example.
Now, money that was taken from cigarettes actually did not go to help people rehabilitate themselves from smoking. In fact, the government had wished more people smoke so they could get more money from that. It's a soft target. That's exactly the sanitation tax. And it's a money that is being looked for by the government to do other things.
Unfortunately, we've got 2 minutes to wrap up.
Yeah, sure.
And since this conversation is about looking forward,
the financial solutions. Quickly on the tax.
Yeah, the financial sector, the financial sector. Cleanup
if you listen to my stand in Parliament, I have been talking about this financial crisis or financial cleanup. I don't call it a cleanup. It's actually a collapse of our financial services. When 9 universal banks were closed or dismantled and put in a shape we don't recognize. When about 347 microfinances were destroyed, they said some of them were already closed. About 39 microcredit companies, same. About 8 institutions, finance houses, about 53 fund managers, people who run pension monies and all that, were also collapsed. Do you think that you can create such a big hole of about 400 companies being destroyed in the financial sector and have a healthy financial system? And you spend 21 billion in doing that, in causing such a collapse when most of these institutions could have been saved.
The tax is needless.
Yeah.
Okay.
The part is needless. Therefore, you cannot charge us money for your being a bad manager of the financial service. You cannot charge us that money for being incompetent in handling the financial services, crisis. Banks that could have been saved, and I could name a few. I just don't want to be bringing names here. Now, somebody would think I have interest in particular. But we have killed entrepreneurship, within our society. That a young man who is coming up will not dare that I'm going to set up a bank, because you've seen people, indigents, who have been crippled. So you have killed something even in our system, and you are going to ask me for a tax for that kind of incompetence. That is an incompetent tax.
Okay, and since we're wrapping up, I mean, just finally, your last word in terms of whether there's any hope at all. And then there's also this question of, should government be making that grand admission that we are in a crisis, so that we'll be aware that, look, maybe we need to support?
Well, you remember, when we were in office, with when we had challenges, Honorable Setepe, who was my boss, came out clearly and stated the challenges that we're having in this country.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to be honest with the Ghanaian people, so they know where you are and see if people can help. We organized a meeting in Senchi to put ideas together. Ordinary Ghanaians joined to come and help. These guys don't want to, admit anything.
What do you want them to do?
They still want to. Well, it will be for their own good. We lost the election, which we all felt we were going to win. When I sit back now and look at what these guys have presented, I say NDC should be thankful that we didn't win power.
Very well.
Because we would have been presented with something very, very bad. But let me say this, very quickly. This government cannot tax its way out of the crisis that we are in.
It can't.
It can't. The only way you can get yourself out of this, what is happening, is what other people are doing, is to put a serious stimulus package. What stimulus package does is that you need a country to spend. And if you want people to spend, you have to give them the money to spend. When they are spending, they improve economic activities in the system, and that is the only way you are going to get growth.
Well.
They create jobs. That's the only way you are going to get people to do jobs, and you get tax. So they better look at what they are doing, because the model they are using is absolutely non-starter.
Very well.
Now, Nana Akufo-Addo, President Nana Akufo-Addo said something.
Unfortunately, we've just
said something very quickly.
Yeah.
He said that we know how to get the economy, or we don't know how to get people back to life.
Yeah, but we know how to.
But we know how to get the
resuscitate
economy
the
back to
economy,
life.
yeah.
I want to tell him today and tell the MP people today that he's right, that they cannot get people back to life. But I also believe that with the budget they presented, they certainly cannot get the economy back to life.
Very well. Honorable Kwaku Rickett Hagan, the good member of parliament from the good people of Cape Coast South constituency, our guest tonight on XYZ Tonight. The conversation obviously will continue in your homes, wherever you are. That's our show tonight. Good night.